Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Embracing Career Changes, which is part of our Get That Job webinar series here at the Champaign Public Library. My name is Jordan Neal, and I am the career librarian here at the library. So thank you all for joining us. So for the latest library news and updates, please visit our website, champaign.org, or you could follow us on social media if that's an option for you. You can email us at librarian@champaign.org, or you could chat with us just by visiting the homepage of our website. The library is open and we are also still offering our curbside services. So again, please visit our website or give us a call for more information. Moving on to a couple of Zoom features available to you that might help during this webinar. There are some buttons or icons at the bottom of your Zoom screen, depending on your device. On the far left, you have the options that control your sound or your speaker. Moving to the right and within the center of the window includes a chat and raised hand option. You can use these options to ask us any questions or share any comments. This is a pre-recorded webinar, so we'll be sure to relay any questions or comments to our presenter after the webinar. We do invite you to type your questions to the chat or raise your hand, and we can unmute you if you prefer to speak, then ask your question. I'd like to also remind everyone that our webinars are recorded, so please be mindful when you share those questions and comments. Finally, I would like to introduce our presenter, Kevin Martlage of Nextier Advisors. As usual, we invite you to read his entire bio on our website, but Kevin has returned to share his wonderful insights with us. In addition to his experience, he focuses on enhancing teamwork, professional development, and performance through intentionally transparent conversations and solutions. We're so glad that he's joined us again today. So with that, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Jordan. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to meet with everybody again today. So let me share my screen here. I think you can see that. So I have just a little presentation that I'll be following or going through throughout the webinar. And like Jordan said, if you have any questions, I'm sure they can forward those on to me following the webinar. So we're going to talk today about intentionally embracing your career changes. And so what we're going to do as we go through this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about, what is change and why is it good, as well as how you can embrace those changes that maybe you're faced with in your career, and intentionally design, action items to go past or to move through that career. So let me having some difficulty here. So just like Jordan said, I'm with Nextier Advisors. It's a consulting firm that I created, and my purpose that I try to do is enhance performance, teamwork, and careers through intentional conversations and solutions. And the way that I approach some of the coaching that I do and some of the team building and even strategic planning and stuff that I do with different organizations and individuals is really helping you understand and have awareness of how you communicate and how you identify different leadership enhancement things by looking inward at you and your performance and things that can help you kind of take that career or your performance to that next level. And so what we're going to try to focus on today is we're going to focus on 4 different things. We're going to talk a little about why is change a good thing. When you talk about change, a lot of times people get uneasy about that, depending on what that change is. And I'm going to try to put a positive spin on change and help you identify what are some of those opportunities when change comes along. How do you prepare for a career change, whether it's, you have to make a career change or you're wanting to do something different intentionally? We're going to walk through some of those steps, how you're going to navigate through that change, and then how to get there, how to get to that goal that you're trying to achieve in that career by making that change that we're going to talk about. So a couple of things just to kind of, put some context around what we're going to talk about today is, we're going to talk a lot about mindset and what you focus on. And so anytime you're kind of operating in what I call your current state, and, if you look at your mindset being very finite, meaning I'm just there day to day, kind of doing the job, going through the motions. That's what I mean is like a finite kind of mindset. You're playing to kind of win that day and really not looking forward past that, which nothing wrong with that. But if you can really focus on that infinite mindset and kind of looking long term, looking down the road, looking at what those possibilities are, you're going to be able to enhance that current state that you're in and look towards that future state and understand really, what you might be leaving on the table as an individual within your career and your own personal development. And so if you're down here in this finite, just kind of going day to day and you're focusing a lot on maybe the threats or, threats are kind of a big word, but, the things that are kind of those roadblocks that are in front of you, you're going to just stay in that current state all the time. And so we want to try to be in that infinite mindset, but also focusing on the opportunities that are faced, that we may be faced with. And that's going to help us get to that future state that maybe we all want to try to get to, and your performance as well within that organization, within your career, whatever it might be, is just going to continue to rise as you're focusing more on the opportunities or the positive pieces of that change, as well as kind of looking beyond the change and understanding, what some of those possibilities might be for you. So if you have an intentional mindset and you're focusing on those opportunities, the goal would be that you're going to have a more engaging career that provides you opportunities and advancement within that. So those are some of the things, just as from a context perspective, that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to dive into this as we go through the webinar. So let's start with, why is change good? From my perspective, when you look at an opportunity for change, it allows for innovation. It provides opportunities to upgrade or enhance or amend a situation. It allows us to get out of our comfort zone and provides us a unique opportunity to advance. And, those last two, trying to get out of your comfort zone, may make some people feel uneasy when it comes to your career or what you're all about or what you're working on. But when we get out of that comfort zone, that's where we really start to grow and advance as an individual, and enhance our performance, enhance our opportunities that are out there, because we're pushing ourselves past the limits of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And, any time for change, it provides you a unique opportunity to advance in whatever it is you might be talking about. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit, an example of that. So when you identify an opportunity, there's change that comes to you. The first thing I talk about is you got to remove the emotion of that change. So whether it's a positive change or a negative change, or something you want to do, you're intentionally changing that, or maybe something you're faced with where you have to change, you got to kind of get that emotion out of it, because emotion can kind of derail some of the things that you're intentionally trying to achieve by working through that change. You also have to identify the positive and negatives of making the change. So you're always weighing, what's the positive outcome of this change? What's the negative outcome of this change? And am I okay with that? And I'm weighing, those two things as I'm navigating through the change to help you determine your best path forward. And then, as we talked about a couple slides ago, you want to be focusing on that positive, but you definitely want to understand the negatives that are involved, because you don't want those negatives to derail you, and you want to be proactively trying to overcome some of those negative things as you're focusing long-term down the road on those positives. And then the ultimate goal is you want to determine the best outcome, kind of develop your action plans and move forward. So everybody deals with change in a different manner, especially when it comes to you personally in your career. But the goal would be that you're going to, identify the best outcome or long-term goal for you, and then come up with those action plans that kind of come to overcome that and to kind of move forward in that path that you've created. So how do you prepare for a career change? I think, we talked a little bit about, how do you embrace career change and how do you prepare for that? You have to understand yourself, your personal goals, your values, and your skills. And if you've been on some of the previous webinars that I've done through the Champaign Public Library, we talk about some of those things, about how to identify, what your goals are, what your values are, what makes you who you are in terms of your career. And certainly the last webinar we talked about is about how we identify your skills. And we'll kind of recap some of that as we're going through this, because I think it's all very important to remember and to work through as you're navigating this change. You always want to continue to focus on the opportunity, but certainly be flexible. The best laid plans always change, they say, and we could have a great action plan about how you're going to be moving through your career and advancing your career, navigating the change, but there's always going to be something else that's going to come up. And so you have to be able to be flexible, but without losing sight of that long-term goal, and always be looking forward, but never forget what you got here. And so I always talk a lot about, what's your story? What makes you you? What are those past experiences that you have that you can relate to or talk about or pull from as you're trying to navigate through this change and identifying what might be next for you. And so you have to understand yourself first is the first thing that we talked about. And this slide may look familiar to some of you that have been on the other webinars, but you have to intentionally embrace change begins with understanding the following about yourself. And these are what I call the 4 W's in career planning. And I help individuals all the time kind of work through what these 4 things mean to them in their career. And so you have to first start by asking yourself, who am I? What makes me who I am? And then you move into what do you value? What do you like to do? And which environments allows me to be the most productive? And if you can work through all 4 of those questions, you're going to be working through the opportunity then to help yourself have some ammunition, so to speak, to embrace that change intentionally. So when that change you're faced with, if you physically or mentally know who you are, what you value, what you like to do, and what environments allow you to be most productive, it's going to help you make some decisions as you navigate through that change intentionally, instead of just going into that change blindly and just saying, oh boy, how am I going to get through this? You're going to have at least some bedrock, foundation to kind of work from as you're making some decisions to intentionally navigate through that change and ultimately through your career. So that would be the first thing, is embracing that change and is answering those 4 questions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the webinar. The next thing is when that change arises, when that change presents itself, I always start with take a deep breath. Hopefully it's not the end of the world. You just need to kind of get yourself in that mental state where you take a deep breath and say, okay, let me look at this change. Let me look at these opportunities. Let me think infinitely as opposed to finitely. Let's focus on the positive instead of the negative of this change, and just take that deep breath and get in that good state. And then try to identify what's positive about the situation, and what does this change mean? And always, the reason you do that is to always remain focused on that positive outcome and how you're going to get moved through that, and you taking that emotion out of it. And so stick with the facts, stick with the data, stick with the things that are concrete to help you develop a plan to navigate through that. And then stay committed to that plan, but certainly, as we talked about earlier, is be flexible. And then the last thing, that you do is you always look forward, but never forget what got you here. So your path is important to understand, to tell your story. And I guarantee that regardless of whatever that change may be in your career, especially if you've been in the workforce for quite a while, and even if you're just joining the workforce and you're trying to decide maybe what's that next step, is your story and what's gotten you to that point is very important. And I guarantee there's going to be things, especially if you sit down and talk to somebody like me or a trusted advisor or a mentor or even a friend or family member, and you talk about some of the things that you've done to get to that point in your career, there's going to be a lot of positive things that you've done. Even if it seems like there's a lot of negatives, if you really dig deep, there's a lot of positive things that you can pull from to use in your past experience to help you identify some of those potential opportunities. And then I always encourage you to challenge yourself to think more infinitely about your future, and then get outside of your comfort zone, as we talked about. And so those are just some things that I recommend as you're looking at change, as you're faced with maybe change that you were not aware of, or you're intentionally sitting there going, hey, I just need to move past this and to make some kind of change in my career. And so that gives you just a little bit more context as to the approach to some of this. And so the next thing we're going to get into is, how are we going to navigate this change intentionally? And so, regardless of where you are in your career journey, if you're wanting to make a change, you must understand the why first. And you must understand, why am I even thinking about this career change? What are the reasons behind it? And what am I faced with? And so, to answer that why, there's typically maybe 4 things that you might be faced with. You're wanting to make a change because maybe you're unhappy with the current situation, or maybe you feel like you could provide more of an impact doing something else. either within your current organization or a new organization or doing a different job or having a different responsibility. Maybe you just need a change, which is that's fine too. And I always give my, my coaching clients and people that I work with on their careers, advancing their careers is, it's healthy to once a year sit down and ask yourself those questions. Am I still happy? And am I still doing things that I'm making an impact for? If you answer yes, then great, you go another year. If you answer, hey, you know what, maybe I do need to change, then you start to dive into some of those things and try to decide, why you need that change and what that change is going to be. And then perhaps you're forced with the change due to changes in your company or organization. So like maybe your company's relocating or they're downsizing or you've been laid off or they're doing cutbacks of some sort. And so, those are typically the 4 areas that I work with individuals. And all of those allow you to intentionally kind of design what's next for you instead of maybe feeling like a victim of, this organization is relocating, now I have to find a job, or they laid me off, now I got to find a job, or, feeling a victim to the things that you're responsible for on your daily basis, where it's leading you to say, hey, I just need to change. We want to be very positive in those areas. And so one of these examples I'll give you is it's my own personal example is this bottom one. I've had like over a 25 plus year career. I've worked with, FedEx and Xerox, a big printing company out in New York City, worked in corporate America, had great advancements and did all kinds of things and just thought, the career was taking off. And I got to do a lot of cool things. And I made the decision to jump into the nonprofit world with the last organization I worked with and found myself in a position where I have found my dream job after 25 years. I was traveling, I was making an impact on people's lives. I had a great team working for me, a great organization, great leadership, really felt like I was making that difference. And I was forced with the opportunity that the change came my way where the organization decided to relocate to another state. And while they offered me to go to that new state within my same role that I had at the director level, I chose not to, just because of the family impact of moving my family, a few states away and doing this. And so I had to make a really tough decision, as did a bunch of people in the organization, whether or not I was going to go or not go. And ultimately, I decided not to go. And I decided to jump into starting my own business and really being able to focus on helping other individuals realize their ultimate goal, realize their ability as a team on how to work better, realize the strategic direction of their organization, and helping them kind of do all the things I've always enjoyed about in my career and putting that together and starting a company to help people do that. And so the reason I give you that example is because I could have very easily been faced with that change and been very negative and very like, oh no, what am I going to do now? And I have to admit, there was times where I had those conversations with myself. But once I started looking past the hurdle that was in front of me, and once I started looking past, what can I do and what impact can I make, and how am I going to do that, that's when it started to all formulate around, hey, here's the steps I can take to do this. And, can I support this financially? Can I support this, personally with my family? Do I have the means to maybe pull this together and make this happen? How am I going to be flexible through that process? And so, the reason I give you that example is because I very easily could have been doing something completely different now. Hey, I'm going to go out and just find any job. But then maybe I could have made, a couple different changes along the way, where if I sat and took the emotion out of it, thought very intently about what do I want to do as a person? What are my interests? What are the 4 W's for me? What kind of environments do I find to be very encouraging and impactful in my life? It helped to paint that picture, and it helped to show what that goal is and how I could achieve that goal. And so we'll kind of pull from that story a little bit as I walk you through the rest of this. But that's where the why comes in, and really helping yourself identify, why am I making this change? and what does that mean to me? So once you have that why kind of determined, you then go into what is your goal for making that change? So what does the end goal look like? What current skills do I have that can take me there? What additional skills do I need to achieve that goal? And what is my plan? And so when I started to look at, what that end goal looked like for my company was, I knew I wanted to start my own company. I knew some of the things that I wanted to provide and help people with, whether it be career coaching or team development or strategic planning or all those things I like to do. And so I made a list of what my skills were and what things I could navigate through and utilize from. What are the things that got me to that point in time? And then what are some additional skills I needed to achieve my goal? And so, one of the things I identified very quickly is I needed to become certified in what's called the Myers-Briggs Strong Interest Inventory and the Myers-Briggs Personality Assessment process. And so I went out and obtained those certifications because I knew that was going to help me achieve these goals of being able to impact people's lives in many different ways. And some of the previous webinars, we've used some of those Myers-Briggs tactics through your strong interest inventory and helping you identify your personal interests and how you can turn those into a career goal. And so then I had a plan, and the plan was very simple at first, but then continued to get a little bit more complex and more specific as I started to look long-term at that goal and then work my way back and fill in the blanks. And so you have to have a goal for making that change. And my goal was to continue to impact people's lives intentionally and transparently through some of the solutions that we did. So now I have the why. I have my goal of what we're trying to achieve. And then you have to talk about your plan. And so you identify those transferable skills. And we're going to walk through some of these pieces for the rest of the webinar. You have to identify those transferable skills I talked about. You complete maybe a personal SWOT analysis, which are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to help you continue to build out that picture of what your career needs to look like or what you want it to look like intentionally. Certainly updating your resume, even though, some good advice that I got later on in my career is even though you're happy with your job and happy with what you're doing, keep that resume updated because you never know when that change may need to happen and when that change is going to take place or where that opportunity may arise. And you don't want to spend all of your time kind of getting these things up to date because you need to be focusing on navigating through that change. And so have your resume updated. Always keep your social media aligned with that resume as well. So, ideally you have a profile on LinkedIn and or Facebook, and all those things on LinkedIn is aligned with what's on your resume. So you're keeping those things updated throughout your career. So when that change happens, you're ready to go. Reach out to your network can be part of your plan. So I know when I started my business, I reached out to people that I'd done business with 20 years previous, just to let them know what I was doing. And just to let them know, hey, I'm navigating through this. What do you think? What are your thoughts? I had a lot of trusted advisors that I could pull from, friends and family, and letting them, kind of bouncing ideas off of them. So you really want to make sure that, part of your plan is you're pulling in this network of people that maybe you knew in college or even high school, or teachers that you've had, professors, colleagues, if you've been in the workforce, people you've worked with at other companies. Always keep in touch with those networks or that network of people so you can help you navigate this plan and build this plan as you're going through it. And then you got to begin the process, and you have to be flexible. And so for me, once I finally made that decision, I'm doing my own thing, I went out and created an LLC in my company because that was the beginning of, hey, now I have something that I'm going to be building and I'm going to be moving through as I'm navigating this change that I'm faced with in my career. So for somebody that's making a career change, maybe to go to another company or look for that other job, beginning that process is, hey, you're applying for that first job, or you're reaching out to that company to start talking to them, whatever it might be, but have that starting point for your plan and then be flexible as you're navigating through that plan. So how do you get there? And so there's a couple things, and some of this will be a repeat of some of the other webinars we did, but as we're trying to tie all this together is, How do you get there and navigate through this plan and those steps that we just talked about? And so the first one is your transferable skills. It's very important to identify the transferable skills you possess as a candidate for a job or as you look for that next job. And your transferable skills, or just your skill set, is what sets you apart from other people. It's what makes you who you are in terms of your ability to do a job. and it's really, a culmination of your whole work experience or your college experience or even your high school experience if you're starting to just, go right into the workforce. These are the things that set you apart from other people that may be competing for those same jobs. And so it's very important to identify what those are. They also help you identify potential jobs that align with your skills. So say you're in that category where you just want to make a change and maybe you don't know why, but you just know I got to do something different. One way you can look at it is, what are the skills I have? And then let me look for some jobs that have those skills that are involved in that. Because at that point in time, I can then start to look at specifically maybe some companies or jobs I want to go to because I know I already have a skill set that's going to allow me to do that. It helps you identify potential next steps in your career based on skills and interests. So, not only once you identify those transferable skills, but if you also have a really good understanding of what you're interested in doing, those are two very good data points that you can use as you start to navigate through this change or start to look at that next step in your career and what that change might be. And your transferable skills always allow you to continue to understand, identify you regarding your career and overall goals. And so the skills are just very important as you're doing that. And I'm a true believer of helping people identify those skills to continue to complete that picture of what your story is all about and what you're capable of and what you have to offer that next job. And it can go into, as we talked in the last webinar, helping you with some of those interview questions, helping you develop those resume questions or, those resume points to talk about. We're going to kind of go through quickly a little process you can go through to help you identify those skills. So to identify your transferable skills, you can do basically two things. You can make a traditional list and rank them. So you just sit there and you're thinking about, what am I good at? What do I do on a regular basis at my current job? Why do you feel that you're good at these things? And what are some kind of tangible results that relate to those transferable skills? And so that's one way that you can do it just very quickly and start making a list. Another way is to use, we dove into last time, is your success stories. And a colleague and strategic partner of mine in Wayfinders Consulting kind of uses this method, and I find it very impactful. And especially as you're trying to navigate through change and looking at what's next in my career and intentionally designing my career, this process that you go through will help you identify your success stories as well as your skills, which both are very important as you're navigating through that. And so the success stories is you write down 10 success stories that something you're passionate about and excelled at, basically things you like and were good at. And these stories must be both. However, it doesn't mean you're the expert and perfect, but had some positive ability towards this story. And these can be anything from, volunteering activities, athletics, school projects, jobs, projects around the house, starting something new, something you create, a personal goal, etc. But it's just taking some time to really identify what are 10 things that are success stories that I can talk about. And you just write down a couple sentences about each, kind of describing those successes you had and how you illustrated that success, what you're passionate about and excelled at. And so once you do that, you begin to identify some common skills that you use to achieve that success. And you kind of start to then chart out some of those skills. And you'll begin to see some trends and some of the skills that you use on a consistent basis. And those identified skills can then be used in a variety of ways, especially as you're navigating change. That's why I thought it was important to kind of talk about it again, is helping you identify those skills and those success stories as you make those changes. And so one example that you might do is, some of your identified skills you can see here on the screen, leadership, teamwork, communication, creativity, execution, creative listening, adaptability, critical thinking, and technology skills. Those are just some common skills that you may identify as you're going through this process. And then if you're taking your top 3 success stories, you're kind of going through them and you're making a note on your page about, what did I use in those situations in terms of leadership, communication, creativity, listening, and so forth. And then you're summarizing those totals both across and up and down. And so what this is going to help you do is it's going to help you identify, those skills that you have that you can then look at, okay, I need to make this change. Where can I continue to use these skills to help me navigate this change and achieve that ultimate goal that I have? And even you'll find is, you want that new job, use a lot of these skills, obviously, so you have a very good onboarding plan and you're integrating in that organization, the job very quickly. But you also see that some of these skills like communication and creativity and even execution, if you have that, are going to be important as you're navigating through this change as well. So not only will it help you identify that long-term goal and maybe some jobs that allow you to use these, it'll also help you to kind of navigate through this by using some of your skills that you use in your normal job. And so it's a very interesting process to go through and something I highly recommend to help not only identify that next job, but also, some things that you're going to be using and doing in that next job. And then we go through and kind of prioritize them. So, the number one thing on your list should be the thing that you feel like you're the most developed in and have the best abilities in. And then you kind of stack rank them from top to bottom. And then, you want to start to make some specific things that you were successful at in those categories. So like, for instance, the leadership, maybe this person led a team of 15 individuals towards a common goal. Or in teamwork, they collaborated with 3 different departments during a project. Or you had to pull together 6 of your classmates and you were the leader of a project in your college. And what did that mean and how did you do it and what did you achieve? And so this process, by putting some specific out there, is going to help you identify some important information for you that you can then use in a variety of different ways. And hopefully it's helping you to identify some of those jobs that allow you to use those skills, but it's also going to help you begin to start to talk about the successes that you've had in your career, which are going to be very important as you're intentionally changing that career. Because you're going to get in that situation with a new manager or somebody you're interviewing with. They're going to be asking you, tell me something you're successful at. Tell me what some of your leadership skills are. How did you prove that in your last job? How are you going to bring that to the table in this new job? And so it's very important to kind of start mapping this out for yourself to help you not only navigate through the change, but also to start to create that narrative for when you're getting in those interview processes and going through the interview phase with those things. So when you're identifying these things, you want to be very specific. You should document metrics if you happen to have them. Develop your narrative around each one and align your skills with the job description, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. But you're starting to paint that picture and get it very, kind of formalized, so to speak, to be one set of data points that you can use now as we're navigating through the change. And so that's the success stories and how you develop details and skills and specifics around that. And now we're going to move into what I'm going to call the personal SWOT analysis, which is going to give you even more insight into, your career to this point and give you some other things to consider as you're trying to make that change or decide what that change is. And so a SWOT analysis it's something that's been used forever. A lot of organizations use it as they're doing maybe strategic planning, where they're going to identify, for my organization, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats. That's where the SWOT comes from, SWOT. And so my little take on this and change on this is we're not going to look at maybe the organizational strengths, but we're going to look at what are your personal strengths? What are your personal weaknesses or opportunities you have for development? What's the opportunity in the change that you're presented with that you could take advantage of? And what are some of the threats with that change that you need to be very aware of and always taking into consideration as you're navigating through that? And so it's very simple. You make a quadrant like this on a piece of paper, and under the strengths, you just start listing things. What are your strengths? And so some of these might be your skills that we just talked about, which are transferable skills. They're at the top. And there can be as many or as few of these strengths as you can come up with, but really spend some time and be critical about yourself about what are my strengths that I feel like I'm really good at. So, for instance, this person in this example, transferable skills are their strengths. Their background is their strength. They've had maybe a huge career, you know, with a lot of different experiences and things they can pull from and leadership opportunities or whatever. Or it could be background for a student that maybe there was a lot of things that they were involved with on campus with different organizations and so forth. And so really, you know, the background of this individual is something that they feel like is a strength. A proven track record this person has, similar job responsibilities, anything else you may identify that you feel like is a strength of yours if somebody was to ask you. And so that would be in the top left corner. Your weaknesses then would be, or opportunities, you know, hey, there's some additional training I might need because I've been maybe doing this job for so long, I'm great at it, but if I'm gonna make a significant change, I may have to get some other training. So like, for instance, with me, when I started my own company, I had a huge background, a lot of skills I felt like I could transfer and intentionally use. But I knew I was probably gonna need some other training because I've never owned my own company before. I've never, you know, done maybe strategic planning at the level of strategic planning that I was going to do. And so how could I develop my skills as I'm starting this new job and intentionally doing that? Maybe there's a lack of certain skills, or maybe I'm totally going into a different industry. You know, when I made the jump from, you know, the corporate world with FedEx, I've been with for 15 plus years, and now was going into the nonprofit arena. You know, they hired me to bring in kind of a business mindset to this one department. It was a totally different industry, and it was a totally different way of thinking, where FedEx was all revenue driven and, you know, metrics and numbers and, you know, how can you ship more packages quicker and all that. The nonprofit was different. It was all about how can we impact these people's lives, which there's a piece of that in FedEx too, but it was different. And so the pace of the industry was different. The things I was responsible for was maybe different. And so I had to really identify some of those things as, hey, you know, it's okay, I can navigate through that, but I'm going to have to be very aware of the differences as I'm going through that. You know, are there any other maybe required certifications or licenses you may need to go get, and how long does it take you to get those things? And so that's how you can kind of navigate through what are my personal weaknesses or some of the opportunities that, you know, of this change that I'm going to have to address. And the next thing would be you're going into your opportunities. So this is the fun part, you know, as you're looking through a change that maybe you're presented with, or you have that why that, hey, I need to go do something where I can make a bigger impact for people, or, you know, hey, I'm faced with this adversity where I have to go find another job. Well, how can I make the best of this? And so, you know, maybe the opportunity that you're faced with is there's going to be a better environment you're going to be able to work in. Maybe there's more money. Hopefully, we all like more money, right? So maybe there's more money or compensation or benefits that are there. There's a better work-life balance, perhaps. There's more upward mobility. Maybe there's more opportunity just to grow as an individual within this new organization and this new job. And so you're really looking at what are some of the things that I can achieve, or what are the opportunities that are presenting themselves as I'm looking at this change. And then the other side of that is the threat. So while work-life balance may be an opportunity, maybe the work-life balance is going the other way with this opportunity that, you know, I need to be very aware of what that looks like for me and what I need, because maybe I'm going to be working longer hours, but maybe I have more time off that's presented to me, you know, that I can take some vacation or sick time. You know, maybe that new environment isn't going to be the best for me from an empowering standpoint, or being very encouraging or anything. Maybe that different industry is just too big of a threat. Maybe it's just going to be such a huge change that I need to weigh those options. And am I going to be able to integrate myself or identify a way I can get into that industry? Is the learning curve too much? Maybe I need to move to a different state, like in my situation, where there was a lot of opportunities that I could use my strengths and the weaknesses. You know, there weren't many in my situation as I was evaluating that. Because I was going to be doing the same job, and I felt like I was very good at the same job. But a big threat was I was going to have to move my family to a new state. And so I had to really weigh all those things, and intentionally weigh those things to see if that was a risk that I wanted to take and my family wanted to take, and if that outweighed the opportunity and so forth. So that's kind of a quick way that you can go through and do a personal SWOT analysis and analyze the change that you're faced with. and help you analyze the why and how you're going to get there, and what are some of the things that you're going to have to do as you're intentionally designing that career or making that career change. So what you do with that information is, your personal strengths and weaknesses, you compare that then to maybe the job description that you're looking for. And so if you're making a change and you already know that there's a job that you're wanting to pursue, get that job description and compare that. Do you have a lot of the strengths they're looking for? Are the weaknesses too much? Are you going to have to do a lot of things to be prepared for that job, and so forth? If you don't have a specific job you're going to, but you're making that change, you start to look at it a little differently, and you're almost creating that job description based on your strengths and weaknesses, and then you're going out and trying to look for those jobs. And you're saying, okay, how can I utilize these strengths? I know I can overcome some of these weaknesses. What are some of those jobs out there that I want to go and pursue? Same thing with change, threats, and opportunities. You're prioritizing those, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. We're really comparing those threats and those opportunities and weighing those, because that's going to help you make those decisions as you're moving forward. And so, as we talk, are your strengths aligned with the job requirements? Do you have a background that aligns with the job description? If not, what are you going to do to kind of overcome some of that? How do your weaknesses align with the job requirements? Is there a lot that you have to worry about or no? Is the environment going to be engaging and supportive? And what gaps are there between the job requirements and your skills and your ability? And so you're really just kind of going through and charting those out and really trying to identify and define, some of those things as you're starting to intentionally move towards that new job or look for that new job that you're wanting to get as a change. Same thing with change, threats, opportunities. You're going to prioritize and review the opportunity versus the threat. And it sounds the same, but is the opportunity worth the threat, or are the threats worth the opportunities? You have to look at it kind of both ways. And you're weighing those in your mind. If I make this change, the opportunity far outweighs the threat or the difficulties I may have as going through that change. So that's something I'm going to pursue. Or you know what? The opportunity is great, but those threats, it's going to be a lot, and it's going to be, mentally, physically, whatever, a lot to get through that. So you know what, maybe I don't need to look at making such a drastic change, or is there a way that I can kind of work through this change to kind of minimize some of those threats? So that's how you kind of analyze the change using a SWOT analysis. The last one I want to kind of talk about, the next one, is this is a repeat of a slide earlier, but it's reviewing your 4 W's. And so you now have your SWOT analysis. You now have your skills that you're looking at. You're starting to create that plan and starting to, see what that end goal might be. And now you're looking back about who am I? What do I value? What do I like to do? What environment allows me to be the most productive? And then how do I use this information to embrace the change intentionally? And so as you're looking at that job, if you have a job identified that you're going to be moving into that's going to be part of your change, you can go back and try to do the gut check, I call it, and say, will that job allow me to be who I am? Will that job allow me to still have the same values that I've always had? Will I be doing something I like to do is the most important part, right? And will the environment allow me to be most productive? And so if you have a job identified, it's easy to kind of look at that. And if you don't know the answers to some of that, that certainly drives intentionally some of the questions you can ask during your interview, specifically, whether it's a phone interview or in person, that you can kind of validate some of that stuff. Because I'm a true believer that that interview is just as much them interviewing you to make sure you're right fit for the job as it is you interviewing that person in that organization to make sure they're a right fit for you. Because if you can say that they are, then that's going to help you just continue to remain engaged and intentionally navigate through that change and get integrated into that career. And so some ways you can kind of look at, using these 4 W's, as I would describe myself as, is how have I grown professionally and personally as an individual? So as you're starting to head towards this change or work through this change, you're trying to ask yourself, how have I grown professionally and personally since I joined this organization or up to this point in my career? Or what can I use to pull from to kind of help me navigate this change and get into that new position? But you have to have a good sense of how you've grown professionally and personally. You have to also ask yourself, have my professional and personal values remain the same, or have they changed since I've got to this point in my career? And how important are those things to me as I'm looking at this new job or trying to identify that new job? You may need to go back, and if I ask myself, 4 years ago when I joined the nonprofit versus now, I may have a lot different values now than I have, and I may have a different way that I can talk to people about how I've grown professionally and personally over the last, say, 2.5 years since I started this job, and certainly since I started my very first job 25 plus years ago. And so you're really going through and asking yourself those questions. What about my job do I still enjoy, and what would I change? That's another question you can ask yourself as you're thinking about making a change, or you've decided to make a change, or you've been faced with a change. You're always asking, well, what do I do in my job that I really enjoy? And is there anything I would change? And so those things that you really enjoy, you're hopefully intentionally trying to identify those things so you can find those similar things in your new role, whether it's a new industry or whatever, but you're still trying to do some of the same things. And certainly things that you would change about your current job or your current situation, you want to make sure that it's okay if those are maybe in that new situation, but you want to be very aware of what those are. So maybe you can minimize those things to be as productive and engaged as you possibly can in that new job, because you don't want to go from one situation to the next situation and it be the exact same thing. If you're not happy, take advantage of those opportunities presenting themselves to you by going through this change, and make that change and be intentional about what those things are. Does my current environment still support me being productive? So, asking yourself, what about my current environment makes me as productive as I can, and what about the new environment to allow me to still do those things, and have they changed? And so you're identifying those things and being very aware of what those are. And then certainly it comes back to skills. Again, what am I good at? What newly developed skills do I have, and can I use those skills in a new position? And so I think we've talked about that quite a bit as we're doing that. And then we haven't talked a lot about in this webinar, but we have in previous ones, where, look at all your personal interests and your kind of hauling codes, which if you want more information, there'll be a way to contact me here at the end. We could talk more about that. But, what are you personally interested in doing? All this stuff aside, what is it that keeps you motivated? What is it that keeps you, getting up every morning? What is it that drives you? What are you passionate about? Those are all things that, identifying your hauling codes through something like the strong interest inventory, or some other mechanisms like the Myers-Briggs strong interest inventory, will help you kind of just give you another insight into you personally, and some things that you could do as an or as you're making those changes. So how do you kind of do all this stuff is, what I call deciding to change. And so you can take your identified skills, and you're looking at your 4 career W's, and you're taking in the SWOT analysis that you've done, and all that coming together will help you intentionally plan your career and intentionally navigate through some of those changes that you might be faced with. And it helps you automatically take that emotion out, and it helps you automatically focus on specifics in the areas of skills, your 4 career W's, and your SWOT analysis. And by navigating through all those, weighing all those things, and looking at yourself critically by thinking past the change that you're faced with and long term, and keeping that infinite mindset and focusing on the opportunities or the positives, it's going to help you just create this intentional career plan that will be like no other. And it sounds like a lot of work, but it's not something you do overnight either, unless you have to. Like me, when I was faced with it, I had a transition period where I knew that I'm going to have about 3 months that I've got to find another job. And so I was able to kind of go through some of these things during that 3-month period. But it could be, maybe you show up to work tomorrow and there's going to be a downsizing, and hey, you have a week. You may have to go through some of this stuff. I hope nobody gets in that situation, but you have to look at the opportunity that presents itself with any change that comes your way. And then the goal is just how do you intentionally navigate through that? And so hopefully some of these tools have helped you kind of look at change a little bit differently and give you some processes or things to think about as you're navigating through that change. So the last piece would be, how do I get there? That's the $1 million question, right? You got all this information and everything. You want to develop a career awareness or career action worksheet that you can track your 4 career W's, your skills, and kind of your action plan that you're doing. And I have a sample of this I could have Jordan send out to anybody that might be interested. But document this stuff out. You know, have your personal impact statements, I call it, and this is just a form that I use that you can adjust it however you want. Where, you know, have it very front and center. This is who I am. This is what I value. This is what I like spending my time doing. This is the environment that allows me to be most productive. Have that front and center as you're navigating through the change, because you always want to come back and kind of check the change and check what you're working towards against those things, because those are the things that make you who you are, that are going to keep you most engaged as you're making that career change. Always identify your top 5 skills or 10 skills or however many skills you think are very important to you. You know, list those out and have those front and center too, so you can always be tracking back as you're finding that next job, or you actually apply for that job and you're going through the interview phase. You could talk specifically about some of your skills and those details that we talked about. And then, you know, as you're trying to make that change, especially if you're in the position where you're like, hey, I just want to do something different, I don't know what it is. Look at some of the occupations that you want to pursue by taking in all this information and list it out. And I've got a tool here I could share with you in just a few minutes about how you can research some of those occupations that might be there, especially if you're wanting to change and go into a completely different industry. This tool called the OMET is very helpful in doing that, especially if you have your skills identified, or especially if you have some of your interests identified that you want to pursue. It can help you do that very quickly. And then hold yourself accountable to the process in your journey. You know, finding a new job for the first time is a lot of work. Making a change while you're already in the workforce and intentionally making that change and navigating change, it's a full-time job as well, probably a full-time job with overtime, honestly, because it's a process. You have to, you know, outline your steps that you're going to go through and hold yourself accountable. Especially once you make the decision of, yes, I have to make this change, or yes, I want to make this change. You got to have that beginning that we talked about way back a few slides ago. This is the beginning. This is how I'm going to get here. This is where I'm going. This is my goal. This is the why. Here's how I'm going to do it, and hold yourself accountable. And the best way to do that, if you're like me and you don't hold yourself accountable all the time, get that trusted advisor, get that mentor, get somebody that can help you navigate through this. I'm more than happy to help you do that. But there's also friends, family, colleagues, maybe somebody you could trust to help you walk through that and hold you accountable is key. As you're developing your goals, make sure what we call SMART goals. They're specific, measurable, actual, relevant, and time bound. And so, you know, specific is, what do you want to accomplish? Who needs to be included? What do you want to do this? Why is this a goal? Be able to identify those stuff. How am I going to measure my success? How can I measure my progress towards these goals and these steps I'm going to do? And how do I know when I've met that goal? Obviously, if you get that job and you start, you've met that goal of making that career change. But, you know, how am I going to go through that? And, you know, I'm going to do all this research. So I'm going to get my SWOT analysis done by next week. I'm going to get my 4 W's done by the following week. I'm going to start applying for my first job, you know, July 15th, whatever it might be. And really start to do those things and outline those. It has to be actionable. Start each goal with a verb. I'm going to complete my resume updates. I'm going to complete my, you know, SWOT analysis, whatever it might be. Hold yourself accountable that way. Make sure it's relevant, and make sure it's time bound. Give yourself some specific timing and deadlines for these things, because it will help you and hopefully your mentor or trusted advisor hold you accountable to those times as well. Another resource is the OMET. The OMET program is the nation's primary source of occupational information. It's ran by the U.S. Department of Labor, and it has, you can go there right now through the website on the screen. It has a ton of information out there about any job or occupation you could ever want to think about. There's some jobs that aren't on there, but there's a lot of related jobs if that specific job's not on there. And you can search by your Holland codes, which we didn't talk about in this webinar, but there's previous webinars that talk about that if you're interested. You could search for jobs by your skills and a variety of other filters by just placing those in there. And you'll say, hey, if my skill is, you know, communication, here's some jobs that have communication is a very important skill. It even gives you, in some cases, salary and wage information as well. And so a very good resource, something I highly encourage you to go look at, especially after you're doing some of these SWOT analysis and your 4Ws and those kind of things as you're looking at making that change and intentionally designing that path to make that change. And then, as I have with the other ones, I'd be more than happy to, you can use the link here. If you're registered for today's webinar or you attend it, I'd be happy to give you a free 30-minute kind of follow-up call just to kind of talk about, where you're at in your career journey, learn a little bit more about, what you're doing and if there's anything I can, help you with in terms of some resources or some advice or, help you kind of navigate through that, or even, helping you in 30 minutes kind of decide what the why is. Sometimes it helps just to talk through that. And so by all means, please utilize this. It's a free 30-minute call, no strings attached, nothing other than just the ability to meet you and to help you navigate through this change that you might be doing and do anything I can to help, make that impact you're looking to make in your career. I'll be more than happy to do that and look forward to hopefully talking to some people. And then certainly any questions you can go through and get with Jordan, or here's my contact information. I'd be more than happy to even have a call with you if you don't want to schedule the full 30 minutes. Please feel free to reach out. Check out the website. There's some more information and resources there as well. So thank you very much. Take advantage of all that change that may be coming to your way and help identify the opportunities that are involved with that change by focusing on those positive opportunities and taking the emotion out of it and not focusing on maybe the threat that's involved with that. And I guarantee you'll intentionally be able to navigate through that change and intentionally design your career to achieve whatever goal you might want. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Kevin. That was great. As Kevin mentioned, if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to connect you with Kevin. See, I get my screen back on here. Here's my contact information. If you missed his, again, if you reach out to me, I will relay any questions to Kevin. He's very responsive. He'll get back to you. And again, he offers those 30-minute appointments, which I know some of our library customers have taken advantage of, and they have reported to me that they've enjoyed those sessions. So first off, thank you, Kevin. But those are great opportunities that he's providing for everyone. So our next, oh, you're welcome. So our next webinar after this will be Wednesday, July 14th at 2 p.m. It will be cover letter basics with my colleague, Kat Purcell. This will be live. We only did this pre-recording just because of some scheduling issues here, which is great. I'm glad that we could still host Kevin. But Kat will just talk about the essentials and basics to starting a cover letter. Sometimes people work so hard on that resume, and then you got to get to that cover letter where you can expand on your resume. So we'll talk about that on July 14th. And then here's the remainder of our webinar series in July, but we have a lot more coming up in the summer and in the fall. We also have more career webinars, more workshops related to our technology series, our business series, our crafty adults, and our writers workshops. You can visit champaign.org/events for more information. And then once again, here is our contact information. You can email us at librarian@champaign.org. You could chat with us, like I said, just by going on the homepage of the website. We are still offering Book a Librarian services, so we could help you with your resume, your cover letter. We've been hosting some practice interviews as well. I'm gonna start my video. Once again, Kevin, that was great. We appreciate your time. We're hoping that we could maybe host Kevin in person at the library. So stay tuned. Again, visit our website, champaign.org/events. We also have career emails that I send out monthly where I talk about some of these and I share some of the recordings that we have through our YouTube channel. So with that, I think we can go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you again, Kevin.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
All right, well, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.